Hello bookworm family, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, I'm Danny. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button down below. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell because I am posting lots since I can't go anywhere anyway. And if you're not already following me on Instagram, please be sure to do that. It is at _dancing_bookworm. I post on there full reviews and content. So it is March wrap-up day. I had a great reading month in March. I read 12 books. However, I didn't get through my planned March TBR. I did not read Straight On Till Morning from my TBR video. If you guys want to see the punishment that I had to pick for that, you guys can click the link up above or down below in the description box to be linked to my TBR raffle video for April, and that explains what happens when I don't finish my books, which was sad. However, I still did get through 12 books, and they weren't all really short books. Like, some of them were pretty chunky, so I'm pretty happy with what I did, especially considering in the month of March I moved. We had a crazy month trying to adjust to this quarantine and self-isolation, and just like before all that quarantine and stuff, we had so much stuff to do at my work. Like, we were preparing for a performance before all this happened. The performance got canceled, obviously, but I mean, things were just crazy. So the fact that I got through 12 books is pretty amazing. I read 4 realistic fiction, 5 science fiction and fantasy, 1 poetry, and 3 other. I read 5 middle grade, 5 young adult, 2 children's, and 2 adult. For formats, I had 3 paperback, 4 hardcover, 1 ebook, 5 audiobooks, and 1 graphic novel. And for star ratings, I had no 1 stars, I had 2 2 stars, 3 3 stars, 2 4 stars, and 6 5 stars. So how amazing is that? That in the month that I read the most books, I had 6 5-star books. That is awesome. I'm so excited. So we're gonna jump into talking about these because this is gonna be a pretty long video since there's 12 books. So we're just gonna go right into it. So we have, very first, The Black Mage. This is by Danielle Barnes and illustrated by DJ Kirkland. And this is a graphic novel. So this is about a school of wizardry, pretty much, of magic, kind of like Hogwarts, but they only accept white students. So they end up having to select a African-American student to come be at the school because it's like the new policy in order for them to stay open. Tom has a really hard time making friends, except for Lindsay, who is very fascinated by the school's history and the fact that they've never had a black student before, until all of a sudden they start discovering secrets about students in the past who were also accepted to the school that were African American, and start learning that there are a lot of secrets hidden in this school. So this book I gave 2 out of 5 stars. It sounded like a really cool concept. However, I just didn't feel it. Like, there's like some weird aspects of it where like Harriet Tubman and I think Frederick Douglass, I think, comes back. I think that's who it was. This was the first book that I read in the month, so I honestly don't even remember who it was, but there was like historical figures who come back kind of as spirits to guide Tom through this. And it's not really a series yet, I don't think. I think this is either going to be the first in the series or it's just a standalone. And if it's a standalone, then I really question it because I don't know. It didn't do for me what I thought it would do. I'm not a big graphic novel fan to begin with, but I have liked some graphic novels in the past, and I thought this would be one that I would be really interested in, but it just kind of fell flat for me. So the next book that I read in the month of March is Dropkick Romance by Cyrus Parker. Oh, I forgot to say, Black Mage was not part of my TBR prompts. Like, it didn't have a prompt. I just read it for fun because I wanted to. Dropkick Romance was part of my TBR raffle, and the prompt for it was predicted bad book. So this one is basically a poetry collection written by Amanda Lovelace's significant other. I thought this was interesting in the fact that the author is a non-binary person, so they don't conform to any gender. And that was really interesting to me because I don't think I've ever read from a non-binary author before, which was really exciting and something new. I didn't like, however, that the writing sounded a lot like Amanda Lovelace's writing. I love Amanda Lovelace. If you guys don't know who she is, she wrote The Princess Saves Herself in this one, and The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one, and the books like that. This one didn't really have that vibe of like it tells a story. I mean, it did. It kind of tells the story of like how somebody cheated on this person and then they find true love kind of thing. But it was just kind of a mushy gushy poetry collection instead of like Amanda Lovelace's hard hitting poetry collection. However, obviously Cyrus Parker is not Amanda Lovelace, so you know, they're two different people, but it read a lot like her writing, but not like her writing in the fact that it didn't tell the same stories that she tells. So it was just kind of weird for me to read. I did give this 2 out of 5 stars, mainly for that reason, and I don't know, it did kind of live up to that predicted bad book vibe that I thought it would, mainly because I'm not a lovey-dovey romance poetry person. There were some things in here that I liked that like hit hard, but there was for the most part not really anything I was super interested with this book. So the next book that I read in the month of March is Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli. This was for my TBR prompt for a middle grade read. I enjoyed this book. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I wanted to read this one because Disney Plus came out with the movie starring Grace VanderWaal, and I love Grace VanderWaal. I've loved her since she was on America's Got Talent, and I think she's very talented. However, the movie didn't really do much for me, but the book was pretty good. So this is about a boy named Leo who is very much wanting to blend in with everybody at his school, but then a new girl comes to school and she calls herself Stargirl, and she is very out there. She wears eccentric clothes, and she is just she sings happy birthday to people on their birthdays. She knows everything about everyone, and she's just a genuinely nice person. And at first people are really intrigued by her and want to get to know her because she's like this new plaything that they've never seen before kind of thing. But then the nicer she becomes, people like her less because she ends up being nice to like rival school districts, and like they're big into their football at the school that she's at, so they don't want her to be nice to people at rival school districts, and she does like things that she thinks is like unselfish and very caring, but it kind of puts a bad taste in people's mouths sometimes. So they don't really like her, but Leo ends up falling in love with her, and he wants her to just be like everyone else and doesn't understand why she just won't be like everyone else. So there's a lot of turmoil and conflict there. Reading this book, it did read as a middle grade book because there's like a lot of things in here. This is also like a teacher edition, so like it's got like vocab words and stuff in it. But it did read quickly like a middle grade book reads. However, some of the content would either be like late middle grade or early young adult, but I still kept it as a middle grade read because I feel like the reading level is middle grade, and that's kind of how I based it off of. But this was a 3 out of 5 star for me. I liked it enough where I enjoyed the characters and stuff, but the atmosphere was kind of that stereotypical high school setting, and it just didn't really do much for me. So the next book that I read was Crenshaw by Katherine Applegate, and this was my one-word title TBR prompt. This is about a boy named Jackson whose family is going through a really rough time. They're losing money. They have not enough money to keep their house and food on the table and stuff like that. And Jackson starts seeing his imaginary friend that he had when he was little, which is a giant cat named Crenshaw. And the unfortunate part about Crenshaw is that Jackson is a wicked, literal person, and he's all about the facts. So the fact that his imaginary friend is coming back is really freaking him out. And Crenshaw is very sarcastic and refuses to go away until Jackson learns the things that he really needs to know about his family situation. So this book was really entertaining to me. I thought Crenshaw, like the actual cat, was funny, but the book was very emotionally heavy. I did give this 4 out of 5 stars because I thought it was just a really good, like, middle grade read to teach kids that life is not perfect and weird things are going to happen to you, but as long as you're honest and you do the best you can overcome the situation. And I think that that's a great moral to teach kids no matter what. But I think that the book did it in a way that everyone can understand and everyone can take something from. Like, it was just a warm-hearted book. I just enjoyed it. Like, I don't know really what else to say. I just enjoyed it. So the next book that I read on audiobook, and it is Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This book took me forever to get through, but I finally got through it. It's not that it was bad, it was actually a 5-star book for me. It just was long. It was 556 pages long. 556 pages long, so listening to it on audiobook, I think it was about 18 hours of audiobook, and I ended up listening to most of it while packing, so that was good, like when we first started our moving process, but for the most part, I did not have time to like put earphones in and stuff to actually listen to the audiobook. But if you don't know what this is about, it is about a girl named Nova who has been raised to hate a group of superheroes known as the Renegades, because when she was little, her family died and she thought the Renegades would come save her and save her family, and they never came. It is also about a boy named Adrian who is part of the Renegades, and he believes all the people that Nova are friends with are evil villains, and so Nova ends up going undercover as a renegade to kind of see what happens in the background so that her and her villain friends can kind of overtake them easier. And she ends up actually having feelings for Adrian, and she kind of starts seeing the good that the Renegades do, but not enough to overcome this villain group that she's a part of. So this book, honestly, it was probably a 4 out of 5 star until the ending. The last 2 pages, like not kidding, the last 2 pages blew my mind to the point where I was like, okay, I need to pick up the next one right away. And I can't because I have so many books on my April TBR that I can't. And looking ahead at May is Believe-a-thon. And I don't know when I'm going to have time to read the second Renegades book, but I need to. And I don't even know which one it is. I think it's Arch Enemies is the next one. I don't really know, but I'm really excited because this book took me on this wild, crazy adventure where things are twisting and turning, and I loved every second of it. So I don't know what else to say besides it's fabulous, and if you haven't read it yet, you should, because it is top-notch sci-fi fantasy. Like, one of the best sci-fi fantasy young adult books I have read, because I don't really like young adult sci-fi fantasy. So yeah. You guys should definitely read it. I don't really like young adult sci-fi fantasy. I have a whole Harry Potter realm in my room, but everybody knows Harry Potter is different. Harry Potter is different. Normally, I don't like young adult sci-fi fantasy because I want everything to live up to Harry Potter, and it does not. But this book was really good and a very unique book. Like, I have not read anything like it before, so it was really cool. Oh, and Renegades did not have a TBR prompt. I forgot to say that. Renegades was just I was finishing reading it from February. Like, I started it in February but never got through it, so I finished reading it in March. The Kingdom was the next book that I read in March, and it is by Jess Rothenberg. So this book is about Anna, who is a cyborg. She is part of the Fantasist group at an amusement park where she's basically like a Disney princess, and they've made them out of robots now instead of having to have real people do it. And she's programmed to do everything exactly to the letter, and people think that she can't lie. People think she can't go against her programming. However, she starts learning that things might not be what she has been raised to believe in this world that she's living in, and she also learns that through a boy that she meets who she ends up having feelings for that she wasn't supposed to be allowed to have. So I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. Again, I had 2 sci-fis in a row that just blew my mind, which is awesome. I'm not a sci-fi person. I'm really not. Like, I much prefer fantasy over sci-fi, but this book was unique. Just like Renegades, like, it's pretty much the same review I had for Renegades, but it's unique, a different perspective. I know people didn't like this book because they wanted more world building. They wanted to see what this amusement park was like, but I'm not a world builder person. Like, I would rather have the action and the characters and let them, like, kind of see the world through their eyes without it being like, and then this part looks like this, and this part looks like this, and I'm not a huge world building person. Like, if I could read a book that's all dialogue, I used to just read plays because I just like dialogue pretty much. But I don't know, I thought that this had a really unique tone to it, and I didn't understand why people didn't really like it, other than the fact that it doesn't world build. So if you're somebody who really needs world building, then it's probably not for you. But this one, I think if you like read for characters and read for character development, then you would enjoy it a lot. So for me, it was 5 out of 5 stars, and this did fill the TBR prompt for a young adult read. So that was from my TBR raffle. Next book that I read in the month of March is Memoirs of an Imaginary Friend by Matthew Dix. This is deceivingly an adult's book, so don't think it's middle grade or YA. It is definitely an adult's book. I know that the topic sounds like it would be for kids, but it is not. But basically this is about Budo, who is an imaginary friend of a little boy named Max, and Max ends up getting kidnapped, and Budo is the only one that knows who took him, and he can't communicate with the outside world, so he needs to get creative in how to save Max and how to help Max. And this book was a 5 out of 5 star read for me. Again, I had so many 5 out of 5 star reads for me this month. I don't even know. But this one, first of all, I have never read a book from an imaginary friend's point of view. Like, Crenshaw was about an imaginary friend, but it wasn't from his point of view. This was straight from an imaginary friend's point of view. And as we know, imaginary friends disappear eventually. So this whole time you have looming over your head, like, is Budo gonna disappear? Is Budo gonna disappear? Kind of thing. So, you know, it really plays with that idea of death and grief and loss in a whole different way that I've never read before. Like, this was just such a unique concept. Again, I had a month of unique books. That's gonna be the title of this video. Unique month. Unique book month. I don't know. I'll come up with something better than that, but I probably won't, and you guys will be listening to this part of the video being like, no, that's actually what you named it, and it's still lame. But this, it touched me. I got teary-eyed at some parts, but I also was laughing hysterically at some parts because Budo was created by a little kid. So he has a little kid's mindset. He learns faster than Max. So like some of the things, like he picks up on parents fighting where Max doesn't. Oh, I should also mention that Max is on the autistic spectrum. So he's in like a special needs class. So he really can't help himself. Like, is pretty much what you've learned from the beginning of the book, is that he's a routine and he needs things done a certain way, and he's very, very anxious, but he has this killer imagination. So Budo is one of the few imaginary friends who actually looks like an imaginary friend, like instead of like a giant elephant with duckbill and like weird things, but he like actually looks like a person, and so he can kind of learn faster than Max, and so he does know like some adult things, but for the most part he doesn't. He knows like maybe like a middle school level of things, and then like it gets to like more adult serious stuff and he's like, wait, what does that mean? I don't know. Like, and it's just funny to see like it's an adult but like a kid. Like, it's an adult with a kid's mind. It's just really funny, but it's also an emotional roller coaster. Like, I will be laughing at one second. I actually want to reread this. Like, that's how bad. I listened to it on audiobook, and I think the audiobook reading made it even better, but I want to read it with my own, like, brain to kind of hear the character in my mind, because some of the stuff was really funny, and some of the stuff was like, wait, that's heart-wrenching. Oh my goodness, let me stop and reread that part. Like, there are so many times that I rewound the audiobook just so I could listen to it again. But this did fulfill my TBR prompt of a TBR vet. I had wanted to read this book. I think I bought it 2 years ago, and I always had put it on my TBR and then taken it off my TBR like a bunch. So it finally made it on. It finally got read, and I'm so glad for that. 5 out of 5 stars, definitely. The next book that I read was an ebook, and it was Ginny B. First Grader at Last by Barbara Park, and this was my K through 2nd reading club book that I did for this quarantined reading club that I came up with. So this is kind of a last minute thing that I did, but I found out it was like the first week of March that people were saying that things were going to start closing and schools were going to be out of session and stuff. And I was like, oh, what can I do to give back? Because I didn't think that I'd be able to do anything with dance. So I was like, let me host a reading club so that these kids have something to read and something to look forward to, so I started making the videos. If you guys are interested in that, I will link the link up here and down below in the description box as well, so you guys know what I'm talking about. But basically, I needed a book for every grade level from kindergarten to 12th grade. So my book for kindergarten through 2nd grade was Junie B. First Grader at Last by Barbara Park, and this is about Junie B. Jones. So if you guys have ever read the Junie B. Jones series, it's hilarious, first of all, but it is definitely for like younger kids. I did count it towards my books though, because it was still 76 pages of my life that I read. So, but she is this hilarious, sarcastic, witty, a little bit rude 6-year-old with like the biggest attitude and biggest personality, and I love the Junie B. Jones books so much. They're my favorite as a kid, and in this specific book, she starts 1st grade. None of her friends want to be friends with her anymore, and she finds out she has to get glasses, and it is just, my favorite part of this is her teacher is walking her down to the nurse's office to get her eyes checked, and he says, "You'll love Mrs. Weller. She's a lovely person." And she goes, "Well, Recess is a lovely person too." And I don't know why, but I cracked up at that line. I was like, I have a 6-year-old niece that I live with, and I can see her saying things like that. Like, I think that's why it was so funny for me. But I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars because obviously it's a little kid's book. It didn't do much for me, but as a kid, these were like my favorite books. So as a little kid, it was a 5 out of 5 star, but because this was my first time rating it officially, it was a 3 out of 5 star for me because I did laugh a lot. The atmosphere was good. The characters are funny. But it's little kid writing, so you have to kind of account for that, but I do love that book. It is so funny. The next book that I read is Inside Out and Back Again by Thanha Lei. This was the 3rd through 5th grade book for the reading club, and I actually read last year as well, so if you guys have followed me for a while, you've probably heard me talk about this book before, but this is about a girl named Ha who during the Vietnam War is living in Saigon. Saigon is overtaken and she must flee. She goes with her she goes with her mom. Her dad is missing in action. She goes with her mom and her 3 brothers to the USA, where she is sponsored by a family from Alabama who she then has to learn to fit in with. Also, she is not accepted at school. She's wicked bullied, and not a lot of people want to be around her because she's Vietnamese, and that's just the time period that they were in. People from the USA did not take kindly to people from Vietnam, unfortunately. This book for me is a 4 out of 5 star. I love this book. It is written in verse format. I think it's a quick read. I flew through it in 2 days. I've obviously read it before, so I knew it was going to happen, but it's still, like, there are things that I read this time that I was like last time I read it, I wasn't super into historical fiction, so I kind of was just like, oh, like, people are jerks all the time, blah, 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 but now I like historical fiction more, mainly because my best friend kind of makes me like historical fiction more, but I do enjoy historical fiction more now, and, like, knowing more about the time period, and knowing, like, it was 1975 in Alabama, things were not, like, people were not very kind to other races still. Things were getting better, but not great. And, the USA had a really hard time accepting people from Vietnam because we lost so many soldiers overseas at Vietnam that a lot of people blamed the people from Vietnam for that and just kind of grouped them all together as, oh, you're Vietnamese, you're a bad person, which is obviously not this 10-year-old girl's fault, but that was the mindset. And the fascinating part about this too is this is actually written by somebody who, let me see if I can find the author page, but when she was 10, she witnessed the end of the Vietnam War and fled to Alabama as well. So this is basically the story, like Thanha Lei's story, that she did in more of a fictional format. So I really enjoy this book. And that was not for a TBR prompt, nor was Junie B. Jones for a TBR prompt, because they were just for the reading club, along with my middle grade pick. So this was the middle school 6th through 8th book for reading club, and it is True Confessions by Janet Tashijan. If you guys don't know what this is about, it is about a girl named True who has a twin brother that was born with asphyxia, so he is developmentally delayed. True is a budding filmmaker and decides for a contest she's going to make a movie about her brother Eddie. However, she is worried that people are going to hate it because they're not going to like Eddie, or they're going to be mean to Eddie, or be mean to her because of how Eddie acts. This book was written in 1997, and it's very true for the time period. It's got like dial-up computer references and, you know, kind of that a little bit more of a closed-minded idea of people with special needs and people with disabilities. So I think right now we're in a point in our lives where we're finally have people who are more accepting and people who are more like wanting things to be integrated, where back in the 90s it was still kind of just becoming that way. So it is interesting to read that time period. I really enjoyed this book. I did only give it 3 out of 5 stars because I did feel it was a little outdated. There are some terminology in here that you would not use for people with special needs anymore. But for the most part, I thought it was really entertaining. And I also picked this book because I am obsessed with the movie. I remember as a kid watching the movie on Disney Channel. It was a Disney Channel original, and it starred Shia LaBeouf as Eddie. And I think it was so good. Like, I loved the movie, and I just really wanted to read the book. I had never read it before this book club, so but yeah, I enjoyed it. I think that the movie might have been a little better, which I don't usually say for books, but in this case, I couldn't get Shia LaBeouf out of my head as I was reading this, and I don't know, I've always been a fan of Shia LaBeouf's acting, and I love that he's a method actor, so I just want to be a fly on the wall of Shia LaBeouf's life when he goes into a role, because I just think he's a cool person. Next book was Far from the Tree by Robin Benway, and this was the high school selection for our reading club. This book I also read a couple years ago, so you might have heard me talk about it before. This is a 5-star book for me. It did not have a TBR prompt because it was for the reading club, but it is a 5-star book for me, and it's been a 5-star book for me for 2 years since I read it the first time. But it is about 3 siblings, Grace, Maya, and Joaquin, who were all adopted. Well, Joaquin wasn't. Joaquin is in foster care, but Maya and Grace were adopted. Grace then gives birth to a baby when she is 16, and she gives up her baby for adoption, which makes her start wondering about her biological family. So she goes on a hunt to find them, and that's when Maya and Joaquin and Grace meet in person for the first time. They all are having like hard times in their lives and have these secrets. Grace is being bullied wicked bad at school for having a baby. Maya is also great. So Grace is being bullied really bad at school for having a baby, but also she's not adjusting back to life. Like her parents kind of told her, oh, if you give up your baby for adoption, everything will go back to normal, but it doesn't, obviously. So she's struggling to understand what her new normal is. Maya's parents are on the brink of divorce, and her mother is also, she's slowly discovering has an alcohol problem. So she's dealing with that. And Joaquin is in foster care, living with a great family, but he is so haunted by some of the foster parents that he had in the past and something that he did when he was 12 that he is just really struggling to move past that. So like I said, this book is a 5 out of 5 star book for me. There are some really funny parts, again, and this is the first time that I've listened to it on audiobook. I've read it like in paperback form before, but I've never listened to it on audiobook before, and I have to recommend highly the Scribd audio version of this, because there are parts that I didn't realize were funny until I heard somebody read it, and then I was like, oh my gosh, this book is actually hilarious, but also like heart-wrenching. So this book was like a true, you go up, oh, that's so happy. You go down, 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 down. Oh, like it was like an actual wave of emotions the entire time I'm reading it. And listening to it on audiobook for the first time, I teared up. Like, I was like, oh, that's what happened? Like, I don't know. I think sometimes when you read things to yourself, you're like, oh, okay, like whatever, like your life sucks, sorry. But then when you hear somebody read it, it's like, what happened to you? I'm so sorry. So yeah, but I really enjoy this book. 5 out of 5 stars, 100%. Love that book. One of my top books of the last few years anyway, probably of all time. So the next book that I read was Nevermore, The Trials of Morgan Crow by Jessica Townsend. And this book is my TBR prompt for a big book. And I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars as well. I have heard a lot of people compare this book to Harry Potter though, and I didn't feel like it was Harry Potter worthy. This is actually a low 5-star for me. Like, it still made it to a 5-star, but it was almost a 4-star. But anyway, so if you don't know what this is about a girl named Morgan Crow who is born a cursed child. She is doomed to die on her 12th birthday. However, they find out that she's actually going to die earlier on her 11th birthday, and she is swept away by Jupiter North, who is part of a group called the Wondrous Society. Everybody in the Wondrous Society has a special talent, and he tells Morgan that she is going to join the Wondrous Society, but he never tells her what her talent is, and she doesn't know. Meanwhile, Morgan's kind of seeing things that people don't see. She's talking to people that people don't know is there, and she doesn't really understand what's happening, but she also doesn't think that that could be her gift. She thinks it's just something that's kind of coincidental, and she is still on a journey to figure out what her special gift is and going through all these trials to be accepted to the Wondrous Society. So I really enjoyed this book. I actually am really excited to read the next one, and I'm going to try to sneak it into Believe-a-thon somehow. I don't know how, because I kind of already picked out my books for Believe-a-thon, but I am really curious to read the next book. This is a chunky book, and for the most part, it was slow to get into for me. I don't know why, because it had action right from the start, but again, I'm not a world building person, and there was a lot of world building, so I think maybe that's why. But the characters in this book are absolutely phenomenal. I think I fell in love with every single one of them, even the bad person. So, yeah. But I also really enjoy just like the aspect of being sucked into a magical world that's not Harry Potter. And I think that, like, I love Harry Potter, like, so much. And I think that people compare this to Harry Potter because it's about a kid on their 11th birthday who gets swept into a magical world. However, these people aren't wizards. They're only good at, like, one special thing. They have one special talent, and that's it. There's no, like, school of witchcraft or wizardry. Like, there is the Wondrous Society, which she's going to go into and get trained, hopefully, if she gets accepted into the trials, but there's not like there's not like a like whole aspect of magic. Like, there's unique creatures and there's unique people, but it's not like 100% magic all the time, and I think that that's what Harry Potter is. So I was confused as to why people compared it to Harry Potter. However, it is still a 5 out of 5 star book for me in its own special way, not because I compared it to Harry Potter. There was definitely the beginning where I was like, oh, I think this is like Harry Potter, but once you get through the first like 3 or 4 chapters, it is not like Harry Potter at all, and it is a completely different world and realm that I fell in love with. The last book that I read, again, was not a TBR prompt. It was just something that I really wanted to read, and it was Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I have read this book before. Jo is my all-time favorite literary fiction character, so this book is a 5 out of 5 star for me. However, I wanted to reread it because the 2019 movie has been released, and I want to rewatch it, so I wanted to reread the book before I watched it to see how they compared. And honestly, from what I remember of the movie and just reading this, they are both like 5-star. Like, they are spot on. Like, I think that whoever made the 2019 movie did a phenomenal job, and I'm sure I should know who made it, but I don't know directors or producers or anything like that because I spend most of my time living in books and not in movies. But it was phenomenal, and it pretty much was word for word the book, minus that they took out, like, they had Aunt Marge go to Paris with Amy. Other than that, like, that's pretty much the only difference that I could find between the book and the movie. And honestly, as I was reading through it this time, I actually started picturing the characters from the movie, which I think was just phenomenal casting. This book forever will be 5 out of 5 star. It is my favorite classic, even though it is huge. Look at that. It's a chunker, but it is... The audiobook was wonderfully done. I listened to it on Scribd. It was beautiful. And it's just, for the first time reading this, I cried. Like, I have read this a couple different times and never cried, but for the first time reading this, I cried, and I think it's because I had that movie in my head. And I just feel like sometimes movies can really help a book. Like, I've read it before and I'm like, oh, that's really sad and heartbreaking and I feel so bad for these people. However, I've never cried about it. And then now I have these characters from the movie and the facial expressions they had and the things that happened, and I fell apart reading it. And I finished it up right on the last day of March, like down to the wire at midnight, finished it up and just sat there as April 1st came around like, why is the world so horrible? So yeah, but those are all the books that I read in the month of March. That is 12 books, people. 12 books. And did you see how big some of them are? I am super proud of myself. However, going into April, I have another stack of gigantic books, 12 of them, that I have to read for not only my TBR raffle, but the Owls Readathon. Pray for me, because it's gonna be a rough one. I'm just looking at the stack, it's up there, and I'm just like, I don't know how I'm gonna do that, and that's not even all of them. I did start one of them. I started the Help on audiobook, so that's one of the roughest ones, I think, but I'm enjoying it so far. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it, so... But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and enjoyed this wrap-up, and let me know if you enjoyed any of these books as well. Let me know your opinions on them, and leave some comments down below. Give it a big thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!
Wasn't that a great video? Clearly books make me very happy. Now you can make me happy too. Click the subscribe button to follow my channel. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you think I did good. And the notification bell will let you know when I post new content. Also, follow my Instagram for more book shenanigans.